Hi, babies. I am going to make a commentary on the parable of the sheep and the goats out of Matthew chapter 25, which is actually a beautiful text that's spoken to me through the years from the get-go when I first got saved. And there are a lot of cherry-picking infernalists that I've found that'll take one verse out of that parable and use it to see, it says right there that there's hellfire and everlasting punishment. That if you end up being a goat and not a sheep, you're going to be sent to everlasting punishment. So boom, Christ literally sends people to everlasting hellfire. I'm going to refute that. Prior to refuting that, what I want to do is actually kind of fall back on the point of the parable, and it is the sheep and the goats, and that there is a matter of perception, evidently, that there are sheep that ended up seeing the immanence of Christ in the lonely and the hungry, the imprisoned, the naked. And so the bottom levels of suffering in humanity, the sheep were able to perceive the immanence of Christ there. In as much as you did it to these, the least of my brethren, you did it to me, to those that were extending compassion and good works towards the revelation that they had of the value that's on humanity. And the goats, went their own way, and they left the destitute and the naked, and they didn't care, and they didn't perceive the immanence or the immanence of Christ or the value that is on humanity in the naked and the hungry and the lonely and the imprisoned. And so at judgment, we see sheep getting their rewards and goats being sent for punishment. So having recapped it, let me just say that the point of the parable, which is why it's resounded in my heart from day one in 1989 when I first started walking with Christ, is that there is value on humanity and that Christ is inherent in humanity. And just the aspect and the depths that God has gone to plunge into, to plumb, in order to experience all levels of our humanity just stood out to me. That when we are suffering, when we are naked, when we are hungry, when we are imprisoned and restricted, that Christ is in those things to win it with us. That's just always resounded to me through that parable. And it just seems so ironic and counterintuitive when I hear infernalists come along and take one verse, verse 46, and use it as a proof text for hell. And now verse 46 is the judgment on the goats. So we have the sheep going their way to everlasting life, and he turns to the goats, those that are on his left. What he says is, depart from me into everlasting punishment. And so that defaults in our minds to, okay, we've been conditioned and indoctrinated in hell, so the goats must be going to suffer everlasting hellfire because of a matter of perception that they didn't perceive. They were in a state of blindness, and so the inherent value in humanity and the immanence of Christ within humanity was not something that they were perceiving, so that they get judged for eternity for that everlasting punishment. Now, if you look at actually the context in Greek of what that verse means, what those two words mean, everlasting punishment, it actually kind of brings the parable together when you understand what it actually means in Greek. It's been mistranslated ever since it was translated from Greek into Latin. It started getting kind of an eternal and retributive nature on those words. It was like that was conveyed incorrectly when it was first translated out of the Greek into the Latin. And the word in Greek basically is aionios kolasis, which literally means a limited duration of time and age enduring correction, which goes perfectly along with the theme of the parable, in that the goats were in a state of blindness. They didn't receive the immanence of Christ. They didn't perceive the value in humanity, and they need to be brought corrected into a place where they will see, because those that are born of God see the kingdom of heaven, of God. So, if the writer wanted to infer that there is everlasting hellfire due to a lack of perception, it would have read aidios timoria. It's a Greek, which literally means never-ending retribution. So it's not that word. It's not aidios timoria. It's not everlasting retribution. It's aidios kolasis, which means a time of correction. So I just wanted to bring that out. There are such heavy-duty implications on this. This has skewed all of our understanding. I mean, even when, from the beginning, when like I said, the Greek was translated into Latin, that was when the meaning of these words started being skewed. And in further research into some of these matters, it actually appears that it was advantageous for some of those that were rising into hierarchy in the early church to keep people under a specter of this kind of threat and punishment, just in order for behavior controls. There's a doctrine of reserve that was observed during that time, during people that were taking roles in authority in the church, and it was important to keep people acting right, for lack of a better term, in a simple manner of speaking. So, the Latin translation was basically, I don't know the Latin words as well as I do the Greek ones, but I know it's eternios, or however the Latin brings it out. It's the Latin translation literally infers never-ending retribution for the goats. And that's not what the text actually says. So let's fall back on what the purpose of the parable actually is, which is the value in humanity and the immanence of Christ within it and us.